What do you think about America's gun culture?
I think it's gotten out of control.
Honestly, out of control.
Kind of horrible. It needs to be fixed because it is out of control.
I think we've gotten more violent.
I mean, as we see in America, the past years, there's been massive school shootings.
I'd hoped when I became president I would not have to do this again. Another massacre.
I think we need stricter gun laws.
After Columbine, after Sandy Hook, after Charleston, after Orlando, after Las Vegas, after Parkland, nothing has been done.
And America needs to rethink the idea of gun ownership.
We all know the biggest reason for the tragedy is the gun.
Guns keep getting into the wrong hands.
Compared to other countries, we are the leanest on gun control. We are the easiest to gain guns.
This is the only country where this keeps happening.
When are we gonna do something?
We start right now by voting to pass policies that can keep us from having as many Columbine, Sandy Hooks, Parklands, Las Vegas, Buffaloes, and Uvaldes from here on.
There's a simple, if extremely difficult solution. Reduce the number of guns.
I feel like there needs to be more gun control in America.
I hold out hope that this country will eventually wake up and change this senseless gun culture.
It's time to act.
America is at war with itself. On just about every issue, it seems the tension between left and right threatens to tear the country apart, and the issue of gun ownership is no exception. Just a few decades ago, the idea of banning guns was a fringe concept. The Second Amendment makes America unique in the world, the only country with a constitutional right to own a gun, placing the responsibility of the people's freedom directly in their own hands.
Now listen, son. I'm sending you out to the National Shooting Championships because I want you to learn how to shoot.
But in recent years, this fundamental right has been called into question more and more, with rising gun violence and one mass shooting after another, fueling calls to restrict gun ownership, even to the point of banning so-called assault weapons. But can gun bans and restrictions actually make America safer? After all, in my home country of Canada, where gun ownership is tightly regulated, per capita, gun violence is far lower than in the United States. So why are so many Americans still opposed to gun control? To answer this question, I traveled across America to speak with pro-gun advocates to hear their side of the story. First stop, the Commonwealth of Virginia, birthplace of James Madison, who was instrumental in drafting the Second Amendment.
Why are you a gun owner?
I mean, it's fun. This has a practical purpose, shooting shotgun as well as rifle. And I use my handgun to defend my home and my family. I'm actually concealed carrying right now. So.
How do you feel about the portrayal of gun owners in the media today?
I think it's kind of, BS, really.
I would say the majority of politicians and people within media who throw these terms around like assault rifle, dangerous weapon, have never fired a firearm whatsoever within their entire life.
What is an assault rifle?
I don't think there's a legal definition.
Couldn't tell you. I mean, I think it's something they made up, or something, that they're trying to make stuff look scary with.
What is an assault rifle?
It's a definition that nobody can ever actually nail down.
It's more about just stripping away your means to protect yourself adequately with modern technology.
If you want to know where I am on this, the Second Amendment says absolutely every single gun law is illegal, every single one of them. has nothing to do with self-defense, has nothing to do with hunting. It's about the government will not disarm us.
So we won't have a tyrannical government.
They want everybody to go back to the Stone Ages, I guess, and be armed with muskets.
These are all of the districts that will not comply with gun control measures if brought in that violate the Second Amendment. So that's 94% of Virginia localities. Virginia gun owners shall not be infringed.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
But what does "shall not be infringed" really mean? What were the true intentions of the Founding Fathers when they wrote the Second Amendment?
It's a good question. Like, what does the Second Amendment actually refer to? Well, when they had the Second Amendment, what they were talking about was flintlocks.
When the Second Amendment was adopted and ratified, it took 3 minutes to reload a musket.
They were talking about these single shot, maybe 3 rounds a minute.
Back then it meant musket.
When the British people come over in 1800, I don't think it's in the Constitution to have assault weapons in the year 2000.
Does anybody think we should have nuclear arms? No. Does anybody think we should all have a right to RPGs? I hope not.
I'm all about Americans having guns, as long as they're the muskets from 1787 that take forever to load.
Oh, that's what they meant? Okay, great. Then I guess your Fourth and Fifth Amendment rights don't apply to email, because the founders couldn't have possibly conceived of things like email or cell phones.
Delegate from Culpeper, Delegate Freitas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's been a lot of discussion about an open and honest debate with respect to gun control, etc.
Nick Freitas, Republican member of the Virginia House of Delegates, has spent his life around firearms, including as an Army Special Forces weapons sergeant. Today, he is well known as a staunch defender of gun rights, as both a politician and a podcaster.
Okay, so obviously this is the dreaded AR-15 that is responsible for, I know, right? It's, watch out, it might jump right off the table and start harming people.
You are the highest rated pro-gun member of the Virginia State Legislature. Clearly, you've made gun rights one of your legislative priorities. Why is that? Why is that so important to you?
I almost don't like to call it gun rights. Gun rights puts the emphasis on the object. What this is really about is, do you have a fundamental right to be able to provide for your own security? Or is that something that can be completely shopped out to the government? In a free society, how can I tell a free person, you're not allowed to be able to defend yourself because I'm worried about what someone over here will do? That's the complete opposite of the way that we're supposed to conduct business within the United States. My primary job is to protect your individual liberties, to protect your property rights, provided that you don't infringe on the rights of liberties of someone else. But if your right to defend yourself, which is fundamental, is dependent on somebody else, right, deciding to do something bad, then none of your rights are safe. And so we call it gun rights, but really what it is your right to self-defense.
Well, this ties into a question I have about the term well-regulated militia in the Second Amendment. What are your thoughts on that phrase?
So it's interesting. That's the part of the Second Amendment that a lot of the people that want to see more gun restrictions usually refer to as evidence that what the founders really meant was that the firearms were for the National Guard or some sort of equivalent.
It says it in the amendment, a well-regulated militia. If a militia was there to protect their community for whatever purpose back in the day, what would be the modern day equivalent of that? Police forces.
Given the contradictory messaging from politicians and the media, I figured the best way to understand American gun rights would be to speak with an expert directly. Joyce Lee Malcolm is a professor of constitutional law and the Second Amendment, as well as an influential author whose work has been cited by the Supreme Court. Does the Second Amendment only apply to those in militia service? What is the limit?
Well, in the landmark case at Washington, D.C. versus Heller, when the Supreme Court for the first time interpreted the right to be armed, the majority of the court found that that wasn't the case. I mean, it's just a reason why you need the public to be armed, that you can't have a well-armed and regulated and drilled militia, if people aren't familiar with guns. And actually, when they were drafting the Second Amendment, there was an amendment proposed that after the right of the people to keep and bear arms, they would have added for the common defense. If they'd approved that, it would have been that your right was confined to just the public necessity. But they rejected that.
You have to understand the context of this. A well-regulated militia did not mean that only the military or only official government agents could have firearms. A militia was made up of the body of the people. It's important to understand that the founders, and I represent James Madison's district in the Virginia House of Delegates, were actually very skeptical of standing armies because they had seen them as a tool for the government to oppress its own people. Now, obviously, I served in the military. I think very highly of the military and the civilian control of the military. But we should never lose sight of the fact that there was a fundamental principle at play when they talked about a well-regulated militia and when they talked about the right of the people to keep and bear arms. It was the understanding that there was two obligations there: free people being able to protect themselves and free people being able to protect a free state. And individual gun ownership was necessary for both of those obligations.
At the end of the day, no police department, however large, can protect all of us all the time, or even any one of us much all of the time. So people need to be able to protect themselves, and the firearm really is an equalizer. It means that someone who's older or a woman or anybody can protect themselves.
How would you describe the average person who comes into your shop to buy a gun?
There's no average. They're everything. They're men, they're women, they're young people, they're old people.
And you don't have much gun crime in this area, hey?
No. No, I would say not.
We're headed to a place a few hours away from here tonight. We're going to be doing some filming. What are your thoughts on Baltimore?
The city of Baltimore has the second highest gun crime rate in all of America.
Baltimore City has reached a grim milestone.
Baltimore, at least 5 people dead in 9 weekend shootings.
Despite also boasting some of the strictest gun laws in the nation.
One of the male victims was declared dead on the
Wild
scene.
scene in East Baltimore
300
today.
homicides since the first of the year.
There is no open carry in Baltimore. There is no concealed carry. It is essentially a gun-free zone on paper.
I am at 22nd Charles.
But quite the opposite in reality.
We've got the Baltimore police scanner on right now, and we're just going to be listening and following cases. So you've got strict gun laws here, but it doesn't matter because the police can't enforce them. You can put up as many gun-free zone signs as you want, but if people choose not to listen to them, they're not going to listen to them. So the only people with guns here are people that are breaking the laws, and all of the citizens here that want to defend themselves, want to protect their shops, are completely vulnerable. And the cops are just cleaning up the end result.
This is actually like a really tough conversation to have because the officer that I was talking to was basically saying the reason... Oh, shit. Oh, fuck you.
I visited Baltimore with a former police officer in the state of Florida.
I have a firearm on me right now. It's concealed on my person. The Baltimore police asked me when I was rolling around this neighborhood whether or not I would be armed. They encouraged me to be armed.
Would you have taken us through Baltimore if you weren't concealed carrying?
No, absolutely not.
Then why do people expect the average citizen in Baltimore to walk around without a gun?
I have no idea. And frankly, that's one of the things that I think is borderline upsetting about the situation. The expectation is that some people will just be victims. The people here are exhausted. So they're in a perpetual state of conflict. There's always violence on the streets. The cops are overworked. They don't have enough resources. They're basically dealing with what they can when they can. And there's so many things going on in the community that violence is routine.
All right. It's literally a minute away. Go right. Shots were just fired. Police just came out and told us, and we're headed there right now. So it could still be active. We're literally like a minute away. Left, go through. Left at the red lights. Okay, straight, go.
I love how fucking wild this place is.
Okay, cops are going in right now. Are you guys getting this? Shots fired. So Connor, what does the helicopter mean?
Yeah, so I'm actually genuinely shocked that it took so little time for this to happen. If law enforcement was dealing with just somebody firing a gun into an air or firing a gun into trash, we would have already been gone. Law enforcement vehicles would have taken off and done their jobs, patrolled other areas of the neighborhood, make sure people are safe. The fact that we have a helicopter that is currently lighting us up, and the fact
Looking
that
right at us.
Yeah, the fact that we have 5 patrol vehicles still here, the fact that we have a scene commander on scene, I'm basically guaranteeing you either somebody is very hurt or there's a homicide.
Why do you think there's so much gun violence in Baltimore?
Well, for me, I try to be a little bit more like nuanced in my analysis, but I don't think it's just the presence of guns. What's really going on is criminal folks who have been trapped in a cycle of violence and a cycle of poor social services are doing things that they just know to do on an instinctive level. And what I mean by that is kind of like the fish in water. They see their parents who are dealers, they see broken homes, they see a life of crime. And as young folks, they don't think that they have any opportunity, so they perpetuate that cycle. Basically what we're looking at is the Citizens app. And in it is local people who are reporting things that are going on. And within a few blocks of us right now, we have within the past 12 hours, an assault with a man armed with a gun, a vehicle on fire, a house burglarized with people inside it, gunshots, a man fatally shot, and a report of a man with a gun walking around.
Break-in, burglary while people sleeping. Wow.
Right. So basically, this is a 24-hour sneak peek into what this area is like.
And we're at the active site of 3 shots going off right now.
The truth is that in my city of 15,000, we had 5 officers on patrol at any given time, meaning that each individual officer was responsible for the safety and well-being of around 3,000 Americans. That ratio does not mean that cops can protect everybody. In order to actually do that, you would need to have private concealed weapon carriers or private citizens who also help with the security. And the fact that we have states with aggressive gun control that also forces Americans to be victims, it's actually disgusting to me. It turns my stomach. It makes me angry. It frustrates the ever-living shit out of me that we have Americans who have to be victimized day by day because they're forced to by the state.
Personally, I was born here and raised here, and I will never go in the city. Carrying a gun or not, it ain't worth it. I left this place and I went up to Northern Illinois, and I live out in the country. I'm here because my father's in this situation and my mother's still alive, and that's why I'm here. I would not be in this rat hole. You know, it's every day I watch it on the news. 2 or 3 people shoot each other all day long, back and forth. 9 people, 12 people. This weekend will probably be another 14, 15 people shot. 3 or 4 of them killed.
A young boy up here, about, I guess he was 18, got shot. Boy down here just the other day got shot.
People walk around here like, oh well, it's normal everyday stuff.
I'm sure it's gangs, money, drugs, you know, I'm sure it's all that. It's everywhere. City, counties, it's everywhere, so.
They talk about it, it's like, oh, guess what, I'll come down here. Oh, we had a shooting the other day. Wait, that's not normal. But to them it is.
So this Safe Streets truck here, they're clearly trying to stop shootings in the area, but you're saying...
Ain't doing nothing. They ain't doing nothing.
Even during the day sometimes, I'm scared to death to come out here by myself. I got my man here with me as my protection, you know? It's bad.
The fucking gun. It's called Second Amendment of the United States Constitution. The right to keep and bear arms. I should be able to carry 45 on my side every freaking day. Especially around here.
Would you feel safer if you were armed?
Damn right. But when they're shooting at me, I want to shoot back.
Basically only the criminals carrying guns here.
Pretty much. I'm ex-military. I should have a gun on my side all the damn time.
It's uncontroversial to say that firearms kill people. What's actually more controversial and what would actually require effort is fixing the broken system that we have that keeps perpetuating these familial, criminal, and economic cycles that just keep sucking in and destroying people's lives. If they actually wanted to stop violence in the inner city, that would involve fixing things like schools, mental health, our healthcare system, and income. And nobody's interested in tackling those problems because they're difficult.
It's a family thing. They don't have any fathers. They don't have any grandfathers. They don't have any uncles. and they raise themselves on the streets. It's a lack of the community caring, or the school system not caring either. And the whole bunch, it's just, no one cares.
Who is this memorial for?
A friend of mine.
How many friends of yours have you lost to gun violence?
5 or 6. Yeah, 5 or 6.
What society has done to them people is just horrible. And this is the repercussions of what's going down. They know no better. It's sad, ain't it? It's America now.
Hold up, more. All right, I just want to shout out all my brothers. It was about 10 of us I grew up with. I'm one of the only ones left. Out of 10, 5 of my brothers are dead. If I got started on everybody that was gone, it'll probably be about 50 people gone. That's way too many. It don't make no sense. I don't like living in Baltimore. The only reason why I live in Baltimore is for the kids. I want to shout out to all my brothers. I want to shout out down bottom. I want to shout out 3800 block, Brooklyn Avenue. I want to shout out 42, man. I've been out here my whole life and ain't nothing changing. Only way I'm going to leave is if the same shit happened to me that happened to everybody else.
The police try. I've talked to them. They try, but they really can't do anything. Their hands are tied because of what's going on up in the city.
If you're caught with a gun in Baltimore City, it's a misdemeanor. If you're caught with a gun in Anne Arundel County, you go to jail. And the laws in Baltimore City, misdemeanors right now aren't being tried.
Why aren't they being tried?
It's the prosecutor.
People who are actually on the ground, what they're saying is that the state's attorney's office and the Department of Justice have directed Baltimore law enforcement in order to only enforce high-level violent crime, that they're no longer prosecuting felony possession drugs, and that they're not prosecuting misdemeanor violent crime. As a result, the misdemeanor violent crime and the drug possession and drug dealing is escalating into further and further violence. So I had citizens communicate with me that they've seen law enforcement in their patrol car in front of a fight that turned into a shooting, and the presence of law enforcement did nothing to deter the shooting.
It's really hard to watch what's going on in cities like Baltimore and see cops telling us they're not allowing us to enforce misdemeanors or even bigger crimes that are leading to gun violence. It's really hard to watch governments put all of these people with mental health issues, with family issues, all in the same area, on low income and broken schooling systems, put policies in and put money towards things that so obviously are not working or are counterproductive. And it really makes you wonder, is this a deliberate effort to try to encourage more gun control laws? It's impossible not to notice.
So my perspective on this is that it's almost worse than what you just highlighted. My perspective is that not only could they be allowing these systems to be broken in order to get some kind of policy through, I think that they might be allowing these systems to continue to be broken so they can have a political mandate. Because it's a lot easier to say, I'm a Democrat, I care about you, I care about the coalition of the black and brown and poor white and gay communities, and here's all the sufferings that are brought down onto you by the system. Put me in charge and I'll fix the system for you. And when you don't see that system getting fixed decade after decade after decade after decade, do these people really want to fix the problem? Especially if fixing the problems might lose them votes. I think they don't care, because for Democrats, dead bodies is a re-election. For Republicans, dead bodies is members of a different electorate who are not going to vote against them. So why fix it?
Where do you think most of these guns are coming from? Are they legal guns or
They're ghost guns? Those ghost guns or whatever.
Despite all the debate and policy around gun laws, perhaps there is something which renders this entire debate obsolete, because now we are beginning a new chapter in the story of guns in America.
Ghost guns continue to be a huge challenge for Baltimore City. They are a growing menace to the people of Baltimore and, quite frankly, to residents across the country.
You can buy make-at-home gun kits that require no background checks and are untraceable without serial numbers.
There's a lot of talk about 3D printed firearms. One of the young gentlemen that we were talking to, we asked him how easy it would be for us to get a 3D printed firearm, and he said that he could get us one within 20 minutes and within a few blocks.
The The mayor says that's dangerous and needs to stop, and that's why Baltimore is now suing one of America's biggest ghost gun manufacturers, Polymer 80.
The government does not want the people to keep and bear arms, and they resist it at every chance possible. And so my job is to sue the governments, sue state governments, sue the federal government over any infringement on the Second Amendment.
How do you feel about the association of ghost guns with crime?
How do I feel about it?
What do you think about
I
that?
don't feel about it. Criminals always commit crimes, and our country is not where we should make it harder on law-abiding people to exercise their rights just because criminals might use it.
Now, is it illegal to actually complete the Polymer 80 and build it yourself?
So in most states, it's not illegal. And, since the founding of this country, we've always been able to make our own firearms. The Supreme Court issued an opinion on June 23rd, the New York State Rifle v. Bruin case, where it says that on Second Amendment challenges, whatever the regulation is now is consistent with the text of the Second Amendment, informed by the history of it. So in 1791, when the Second Amendment was ratified, would the founders, would the framers, would the people that ratified the Second Amendment have thought that people couldn't make their own firearms, or that they had to be serialized by an FFL and had to go through a background check? The answer is, of course, no. So you shouldn't be able to require it now.
The Second Amendment may have always allowed Americans to make their own firearms, but the skill and investment required placed it out of the average person's reach. Until 2013, when Cody Wilson burst onto the scene with the first 3D printed gun, the Liberator. Creating the Liberator was a dangerous project that quite literally blew up dozens of times before the first successful firing, which he took the risk of conducting in front of several news crews. Unsure if the homemade firearm would even survive the display, he pulled the trigger. It worked, becoming the shot that would forever change the conversation on gun control.
How's that national conversation going? By Defense Distributed in Austin, Texas.
Well, hello.
I'm looking at the camera. Wow, hi Lauren Southern. Wow, hey guys, welcome to Ghost Gunner. How's it going?
Thank God we're cutting this.
Well, we can do that over if you want.
What inspired you to get into 3D printing of guns?
A simple answer is Julian Assange. I didn't really have like a well-developed political vocabulary, but I knew in 2011 what Mr. Assange was doing on the internet, WikiLeaks, kind of counteracting this Westphalian game of fake politics. I was like, this is real politics. What is this? Can we do something like this with guns?
The aim is to make this gun as easy to replicate as possible, and it means that 3D printing is already on the radar of law enforcement agencies around the world.
What was the political reaction to the 3D gun?
Man, I wasn't ready. I thought I was ready. That's the problem with conservative folk activism. Boy, you really think you're ready. The State Department fell down on me with what's called just enforcement actions, you could say. They have their own special set of vocabulary, But anyway, I was being investigated for violations of the Arms Export Control Act. Each single violation, by the way, carries 10 years in prison, $5 million in fines. And of course, I was looking at with my site, multiple thousands of violations, 100,000 violations of Liberator, for example. They had me. I was completely dead to rights, and at least under this theory. And so I was afraid, and I was defenseless, and there was not yet a theory for how to even approach this in the export control circle. And so I was like, just as a matter of defense, I have to assert the First Amendment. And so my approach was I need to find an export attorney who can help me defend myself under the First Amendment. And that's what the next 5 years of my life looked like.
How did that go?
You could say that it went very well. With the feds, you never really win, but not losing itself is a huge victory.
How do you feel about the portrayal of ghost guns in the media?
I'm a fan. A power that labels something like ghost guns, tells you it can't find them. It's haunted by them. It has nightmares about them, and that tells me that this power is weak. This is what 3D printing guns looks like?
I regret to inform, I think you got an ATF agent over there.
They're always watching.
Now, you've currently got a case against the ATF. Can you explain that?
Sure. So the ATF promulgated a rule and said, we think these 3D printed firearms or polymer 80 type firearms, which are not fully assembled, fully manufactured. There's a number of steps that need to be completed by the end user before they can be turned into fully functional firearms. And the ATF has come in and said, these are actually firearms.
Polymer 80 thinks, well, you know what? We'll sell them the frame and the fixture and the tooling in one box. This was why Joe and the rest of them built the rules the way they did. They wanted to stretch the definition of a firearm in the GCA to say, well, fine, everything in this box is also a firearm. Now, obviously Congress didn't mean that and didn't give them the power to do that, but the problem is such that they say, well, stop us then.
So prior to this rule going into effect, companies like Polymer 80, when they sold an 80% receiver, which they've always been able to do, because it's not a firearm, they could mail it to any state where that was legal. Now, if they include instructions on how to complete it, if they include maybe a piece of paper saying, go to this YouTube channel and you can see how to do it, or if they include a drill bit, anything is now a firearm. So that firearm now has to be serialized, transferred through an FFL with a background check. And they've just completely destroyed the normal person's ability to manufacture firearms for themselves.
The problem is we live in a world of things that are guns and are not guns. We will always give you the tools to make those things that are not guns into guns. Every single day, we make about 10 of these machines here.
To fund his free speech lawsuit against the State Department, Cody built a new company to supply the DIY gun market, Ghost Gunner.
We make a specific machine. We make a little micro CNC. So we have built the building of a gun for the home user, you could say. Someone who wouldn't necessarily invest in becoming a machine shop director, you know, maybe they'll buy a little piece of capital and experiment with making a gun for themselves or going into business. And that's what we do here.
And with the ATF's crackdown on partially finished firearm kits like the Polymer 80, Ghost Gunner responded by introducing something the government might find a bit more challenging to regulate, the 0% receiver.
We began not from an unfinished receiver, but from a primordial, unformed piece of metal. And so from this piece of raw stock, we, in stages, make the familiar form, a receiver for a firearm. And so you could say the ATF now has to, if they choose, decide that this is a gun.
You kind of are keeping one step ahead of the ATF at every turn.
It's a fun little, it's a game, you know?
Cat and mouse.
It's a little dance.
Do you think that ghost guns are responsible for the uptick in crime in areas like Baltimore that politicians would claim they are?
Not yet. They're not responsible yet. I do think it's true that they are becoming a problem. And I think they may continue to be a problem. I'm not going to slow down.
So how do you feel about the fact that what you're creating could potentially be causing gun violence?
You know, I feel safe saying this only because it's you, but that's not my problem, okay? That's a problem of decades of mismanagement and progressive coalitions and compromise on law and order. Sometimes you have to reap the whirlwind.
Cody himself reaped the whirlwind in 2018 when he was indicted for a sexual encounter with a minor he met through an adults-only website. He pled guilty, despite insisting he did not know the girl was underage.
Investigators believe he recently fled to Taiwan after he was tipped off by a friend of the victim.
It's hard not to draw comparisons to the man who inspired him, who also faced accusations of sexual assault. Given the threat they represent to government power, questions of entrapment loom large. The punks, the revolutionaries, the people who go against the grain, they shake up the world in incredible ways, and I'd put you in that box, but things don't always end well for them. They tend to have...
No, they don't.
Dark ends.
They don't, yeah.
How do you think this is going to go for you?
I think you know. You make a big compromise when you're out set for glory, or when you're trying to do something world historical. You make a big personal compromise. It puts everyone in your life into disarray. Like that's kind of a consequence of your decision for heroism or something. And in a way, that decision is always selfish for that reason. And I've seen that. I've seen how many of the people in my life have been hurt, you know. And
sounds like you don't really want to say it, but this might end up with a jail cell for you.
I think you risk those things, sure. You know, it doesn't even matter. I think I'll just have this ignominious kind of, God, how many federal lawsuits can you afford at one time? You know, eventually they make it too difficult for you to keep going. But it's like, it doesn't matter. I'm not even committed to outcomes. It's like, I'm not gonna leave my post. I do believe in like the absolute right of the individual to keep and bear arms. I like that the Second Amendment has evolved into something beyond judicial interpretation. It's like we've encapsulated it in this little download, okay? And so whatever the Second Amendment meant, it means what I say now.
In a way, the advent of cheap and easy homemade firearms facilitated by the internet didn't merely change the conversation on gun control, it killed it.
So American gun control is deceased here?
I try to keep it in the ground.
Is this, yeah.
It really likes to come back up, you know, or at least spin around down there.
Despite Cody's efforts to keep American gun control dead and buried, there's an evil force that keeps threatening to revive it. And this force is as American as the Second Amendment itself. Mass shootings. The strongest push for gun control came on the heels of one of the deadliest school shootings in U.S. history, when a 19-year-old former student opened fire inside Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High, murdering 14 students and 3 staff, and wounding several others.
911, what is your emergency?
Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School is being shot up.
It's being shot up? Are you at the school?
Survivors went on to lead March for Our Lives. Their demand? Gun control.
What do we want? Gun control! When do we want it? Now!
It's hard not to see their point.
In a little over 6 minutes, 17 of our friends were taken from us, 15 were injured, and everyone, absolutely everyone, in the Douglas community was forever altered.
But not everyone altered by this horrific attack agrees that more gun control is the answer. I traveled to rural Oregon to speak with Andrew Pollack, whose daughter Meadow was murdered that day.
My daughter was my love of my life. She was Daddy's princess. She had me wrapped around her finger. She was graduating that year, and she got shot, like I said, 9 times. She tried to save another student, and she ended up getting killed, and the student got killed too, because the bullets went through my daughter, and went into the child underneath her. And like I said, I love her so much. My life is never the same. I just live with the dull pain of having my child murdered.
A staunch supporter of the Second Amendment, Andrew poured all his time and energy into investigating what went wrong in Parkland, digging deeper than the quick headlines and easy conclusions.
What happens in a lot of mass shootings is the media and leftists they usually focus on the gun. That's what happens. And that's exactly what happened in Parkland. You know, you saw a lot of attention brought on to these kids that were very vocal about the AR. The media all got involved, and they all focused on the AR and the weapon. But I couldn't just do that. I wanted to know how this could happen. My daughter, who was is like speaking in my ear saying, "Daddy, you got to find out what happened. And you got to hold these people accountable for all the failures that happened in Parkland."
After a year of research and investigation, Andrew compiled his findings into the book, Why Meadow Died. What it reveals is a broken system failing to stop a clearly deranged person hell-bent on mass murder.
That shooting was one of the most avoidable shootings that this country's ever had. It could have been stopped numerous times.
I'm going to be the next school shooter of 2018.
Everyone knew that this kid was going to be the shooter. His nickname was Crazy Boy.
His Instagram profile showing he was obsessed with guns.
He had a mental health counselor that was going to his house like on a monthly basis.
He was taking medication, but at some point stopped, which should have been a flag.
He punched his mother's teeth out at the house and wasn't arrested.
Teachers claim he was troubled and had been identified as a potential shooter.
He cut animals' heads off, never was arrested, tried to commit suicide.
Also looking at his social media posts, which have so far been described as very, very disturbing.
So one summer, there was a hatchet missing from his garage. And they couldn't find it, and they were so worried what this kid was doing with a hatchet. But meanwhile, that fall, they recommended mainstreaming him into the school with my daughter. And we didn't know this. The sheriff was to the shooter's house 45 times, and he was never arrested.
The Broward Sheriff's Office got over 20 calls over the last few years.
He trespassed at the school a year prior and wasn't arrested. They also had to frisk the shooter every morning before school, and the parents didn't know.
Someone called the FBI tip line to warn them, giving details about his guns, his desire to kill people. That tip, though, never made it to Miami's FBI field office.
The police didn't stop it that day. The mental health institutions, the administrators, had plenty of chances to stop it. 6 police hid outside the building.
5 minutes go by before police officers even enter the building.
An Uber driver drove the shooter to the school with a rifle bag that day, picked him up at his house, dropped him in front of the school with a Cabela's rifle bag, and thought that that was okay. And then they had gates open, you know, schools don't learn.
The people demand a law banning the sale of assault weapons. The people demand we prohibit the sale of high-capacity magazines. The people demand universal background checks. Stand for us or beware, the voters are coming.
This is the first time I've heard of a lot of these points about the shooter.
Yeah.
Why is it that the media ignored so much of this and just spoke about gun control?
It's every shooting, man. I really turns my stomach when I see it, because it's easy, you know, that leftist liberal mentality. It's easy to just point the finger at the gun. You know, anyone could do that and say it's the gun and not look into any of the facts. I looked into all the facts, and if I found out if it would have been the gun, I'd be here telling you it was the gun, because I did my own research. I think for myself, it's a failed system. Every time I look into these shootings, it was avoidable, and it was avoidable in my daughter's school. Uvalde was avoidable. I can't even remember. There's been so many where they could have been stopped.
We're learning chilling new details about the teenager who carried out the Texas massacre.
Like every mass shooter, especially the young ones, this one was flashing red, it appears.
The group messages include a discussion about the potential that he is going to become a school shooter, raising new questions about warning signs missed.
We found too many warning signs to count.
22-year-old suspect was known to law enforcement.
He was twice flagged to authorities. One after he attempted suicide, the second after he threatened to kill family. He was still able to get a firearm. He passed background checks. He legally bought his weapons.
The FBI twice interviewed him and was not put on a watch list. It meant he legally held a state firearms license in Florida.
The shooter had been on law enforcement's radar for more than a year. His own mother saying her son should have been flagged.
2 months ago, he walked into an FBI office in Anchorage, Alaska, claiming his mind was being controlled by the U.S. government.
He was taken into custody by the local police and transported to a medical facility for a mental health evaluation.
Earlier this year, his bizarre behavior leading to run-ins with police. In February, wearing all black, arrested at a mall. Just 2 months later, arrested again at that same mall for trespassing.
Suspect interacting with law enforcement around the time of his high school graduation just a year ago.
The individual was brought in for a mental health evaluation. He was evaluated and then he was released.
There was an investigation, but no charges were ever filed.
So it's the leniency on criminality that we're seeing causing a lot of these problems.
In America, there's not a lot of mental institutions anymore available. So they'll bring them to the ER, to the hospital, okay, where they're diagnosed. The doctor will ask them, did you really mean what you said? Did you want to go kill those people? And of course, most of the time they're going to say no, and then they're just let back on the street without getting any type of background. What's in place, there are laws in place that would prevent them from buying rifles, these people. All they have to do is go through the system. But, you know, I know this personally because my wife works in the hospital and she's an ER physician. So 99.9% of the time, these evil people who make these threats will go to the hospital. The police use the hospitals as dumping grounds. They'll get dumped off, they get evaluated, and then they're let back on the street. So you want to stop mass shootings? Arrest these people. There needs to be due process, because people always talk about having due process, so people don't lose their rights. There's a way to do it with due process, And if they find it that they're a threat to society, that needs to go on their background so they can't purchase a rifle. And you'll see these shootings stop. A lot of them.
Well, there is little doubt that properly enforced red flag laws would have stopped a lot of these shootings. Many Republicans, nevertheless, oppose them, warning against the abuse and erosion of civil liberties.
You know, the red flag laws. A lot of people looked at red flag laws as, well, isn't this a healthy compromise when it comes to identifying people that might be struggling with mental health issues and preventing them from getting firearms? The problem is it completely subverts due process, and it ends up being used as a mechanism where now the government can come in and deny you basic civil liberties without ever having to convict you of any sort of crime, without even having to arrest you. They can just come in and take your firearms. And what we see is this is a massive violation, not to mention the fact that it sets a very, very dangerous precedent with respect to the government being able to completely ignore due process if there's a public safety concern.
I was actually one of the first law enforcement officers in the state of Florida in order to do an emergency risk protection order. We looked up the laws, we looked at domestic violence, we looked at cyber stalking, we looked at all that kind of stuff. And as a law enforcement officer, even calling the state attorney's office, we could not figure out whether or not we had the right to take the man's guns, even if we put him into custody pending trial. So what we did instead, on top of the arrest, is we did an emergency risk protection order saying that this man was unstable and not fit to have his firearms pending review from a judge. It went in front of a judge. He was put into a detox program. He was put into an alternative, corrections program, and he could get his guns back after a year. Now, for me, talk about due process concerns. I don't want one man, one judge to be deciding the rights of Americans. But if you had a judge do a temporary restraining order and then you had a jury of peers determine the permanent revocation of rights, I'd be perfectly fine with that. Emergency risk protection orders, I think they're a necessary part of the puzzle that has very complex and scary due process concerns, but those due process concerns can be addressed.
Red flag laws are a thorny issue that will be debated for years to come, but there have been several shootings they would not have prevented, including the deadliest mass shooting in American history, when a so-called lone wolf with no criminal history or any prior signs of trouble opened fire on concertgoers in Las Vegas, killing 60 and wounding over 400.
All necessary background checks were followed. He never gave any indication or reason to believe he was unstable or unfit at any time.
And why did this individual, apparently ordinary person, no criminal record, why did he do this? The biggest mass shooting in the history of our country.
His motive remains a mystery, even to his own brother.
We're trying to understand what's wrong, what happened. We're still just completely befuddled.
It seems there are two ways people can go on this issue. Try to disarm everyone or try to ensure that good people are armed. Why do you lean towards the arming good people over disarming everyone?
Because I think it's kind of impossible to do that. There's 300 million guns in America. And I think it evens the playing field to be able to have the Second Amendment and to be able to carry a firearm. Criminals don't follow laws. So you could ban anything. You could ban extended magazines. You could ban suppressors. You could ban rifles. But criminals don't obey laws. Like the dumbest thing in the world are those no gun zones. You know what I mean? Criminals, what do you think? Like liberals think that they're going to see this sign and they're going to, I'm not allowed in this place. This is where they go. They go to the school where the sign says no gun zone. They go to the mall where people can't carry. This is what criminals do. I happen to look the other way when I see those signs because I never see those no gun zones signs. I'm going anyway. No one, unless there's a metal detector, I'm going in. You know what I mean? Then I will. But I don't really. It's just something. If a criminal could get in with a gun, I'm taking my gun everywhere. Because, like I said, I'm never going to be a victim and go down without a fight. And I'm going to do that for my friends and my family.
Make no mistake, I didn't shoot him because I hated him. I shot him because I loved everybody that was in my community that was in the church.
Former NRA instructor Stephen Williford was at his home in Sutherland Springs, Texas, when his daughter heard gunfire coming from the First Baptist Church across the street.
All I wanted to do is stop him.
At least 26 people were killed,
20 others injured, many of them airlifted to nearby hospitals.
Police were coming. But we live in a little small community. There's no telling what the response time would be.
And we're also getting word about a hero neighbor who engaged the gunman and possibly helped save lives.
I believe God was covering me at that moment, and the Holy Spirit was speaking to me because I was thinking more clearly than I'd ever thought. I shot Chris Workman in the back and instantly paralyzed Chris from the waist down. And he was walking over like he had done to so many people. He'd shoot him with his rifle, and then walk over and at point blank range shoot him in the head with his pistol. And Chris said he was looking down the barrel of his pistol, and he was just waiting. And as I ran across the street, I yelled out, and I can't explain why I would have yelled out, other than I truly believe that God called a demon out. And Chris said the expression on his face changed, and he dropped his rifle in the church and came out of the church shooting at me with his pistol. He had on Class 3 body armor, and he had on a ballistic bulletproof helmet. My worst nightmares were recognized as he came out shooting at me. And I shot at him. I hit him in the left chest, stopped by the body armor. I hit him in the abdomen. That was also stopped by the body armor. And that's when he ran for his vehicle. I put one in his side, high in his side between the plates. And I put one high in his legs. He was still able to get in his vehicle, slammed the door. He put 2 more rounds through the side window, and I saw those holes open up and glass falling in slow motion. I put one where I perceived his head to be. I couldn't see it because of the reflection of the glass, but it split across right underneath the rim of the bulletproof helmet. And then he accelerated, he turned the corner, and was running as fast as we could away in his vehicle. By the time I got in the middle of the street, he was 150 yards away, and I shot through the back windshield. Police say that round went through the back windshield and went through the driver's side seat, and it hit him just right at the left shoulder blade. And he topped the hill, still running and out of sight. And I'm standing in the middle of the street thinking, it can't end this way. He's getting away. It can't end this way.
A neighbor armed with a rifle had started firing as he tried to escape. That neighbor coming up to Johnny Langendorf's truck.
And to my surprise, the locks on the truck came open. I climbed up in the cab of the truck, and a long, tall Texan, thin build. I'd never met him before in my life. I got in and shut the door, and we were off.
We were doing about 90, 95 miles an hour, all the way down 539 until the gentleman, or the shooter, seemed to lose control of his vehicle.
And he swerved off to the left-hand side of the road, through a fence and out into a field.
We know during that pursuit, the suspect used his cell phone to notify his father that he had been shot and didn't think he was going to make it.
And in the end, the shooter saw that we were chasing him, and he committed suicide. Police are out there to do what they can, but they're never there when it starts. Hardly ever there when it starts. So don't you think it's better if law-abiding citizens have an ability to fight back?
In 1994, President Clinton signed a 10-year assault weapons ban into law.
This is not about gun control, it's about crime control.
By the time it expired, mass shootings were down by a whopping 70%, but the overall gun homicide rate decreased by only 0.1%. The truth is, mass shootings make up only a tiny fraction of gun homicides, which in turn accounted for a staggering 79% of total homicides as recently as 2020. The question is, who is doing all the killing? This is the part politicians and the media would rather ignore. According to the CDC, Black males were most responsible for firearm-related homicides in 2019, while Asians and Pacific Islanders were the least likely racial group to commit murder with a firearm, making them especially vulnerable targets for violent crime. And this dynamic is nowhere near as apparent as in the San Francisco Bay Area. The last few years, this region, like other urban areas in the country, witnessed a spike in anti-Asian violence, just another sad symptom of the soft-on-crime policies enacted by left-wing mayors and DAs. And while they're soft on crime, they're hard on guns, painting the familiar picture we saw earlier in Baltimore, where police are overworked and disempowered and citizens unable to protect themselves.
The Second Amendment, the gun is for people to protect themselves, protect their family, and protect their country if we face a tyranny government.
Ellen Lee Zhao immigrated to America 30 years ago.
I'm from China. In China, you're not allowed to own a gun, but I came to America for freedom. So owning a gun is part of the freedom to protect my country. So this is my country. I protect my country.
She's been tirelessly working to promote America's founding values in a city shaken by progressive politics and social decay.
Oh, right there. Oh, right there.
In Oakland, it's gotten so bad that volunteers are forming neighborhood watch groups to stem the wave of violence engulfing the local Asian community.
So he says when we experience crime, number one, we take pictures. We record the scene. So when the police come right away, then they can show the picture, show the video, and tell them what they see.
If they get into a confrontation, if a criminal comes into the area, are they worried about not being able to have self-defense?
So he says if we experience criminal activities or crimes that against people physically, and then we will intervene physically. By law, anyone can own a gun if they're inside their store or inside their home, but if you carry a gun outside, no, you're not allowed. You have to have a permit, a concealed permit. So they usually call the police right away.
But is relying on police enough to stop crime? As we know from everything we've covered so far in this film, it is unlikely. And this recent spate of attacks isn't the first time the Asian community was targeted. In the spring of 1992, Los Angeles was on fire. A year earlier, 4 LAPD officers were caught brutally beating Rodney King, a black man they arrested for driving drunk on the highway. King was unarmed.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant not guilty.
Charged with using excessive force, the 4 cops were eventually acquitted and walked free, straight into the firestorm their acquittal had ignited. Over the next 5 days, the rioting grew wildly out of control, forcing President Bush to federalize the California National Guard to aid law enforcement in quelling the violence. Lieutenant Kurt Schlichter, fresh off a tour in the Gulf War, was called up for duty once again.
It was a very strange time. I go home, I turn on the TV, I'm living in Pasadena. And Reginald Denny's getting his brains beaten out at Florence and Normandy by a bunch of scumbag gangbangers. And the cops pulled out.
And there's no police presence down here.
The cops are gone. And I look at this, and I'm going, I call the unit, and I say, are we deploying? They said, no, we're not deploying. I said, oh, okay. So I packed my stuff.
This is not a test.
Got the call 2 hours later, you gotta come in.
The California Army National Guard has been deployed to assist the Sheriff's Department and Los Angeles Police Department to restore law and order and to protect life and property.
It was a weird experience. Everything's on fire. Everything around you is like on fire. The thing I noticed is a lot of the local people couldn't protect themselves. The bad guys had guns. The good guys, not so much.
In a civilized society, there can be no excuse for the murder, arson, theft, and vandalism that have terrorized the law-abiding citizens of Los Angeles. Mayor Bradley, just a few minutes ago, mentioned to me his particular concern, among others, regarding the safety of the Korean community.
In the week before the riots, a Korean shopkeeper who shot and killed a black 9th grader after a violent altercation was given 5 years probation. The riots gave the mob an opportunity for revenge. Much of Koreatown was looted and destroyed.
My heart goes out to them and all others who have suffered losses.
With law enforcement nowhere to be seen, the Koreans took matters into their own hands.
Of course, everyone knows about the rooftop Koreans.
What they're doing is arming themselves with rifles, protecting themselves, making sure that none of the looters come to their store.
These are mostly Korean immigrants who ran stores, various other enterprises, and many of them came from Korea. They had been Republic of Korea soldiers. And Republic of Korea soldiers back in the day, you know, it wasn't all boy bands and Gangnam style, okay? These guys knew their way around a rifle. And they were willing to mix it up, and they did.
There's absolutely no presence of police officers.
They were talking to me for a moment. They said they were fed up. They walked away. Next thing I knew, they just started firing at everybody and anybody.
Do you think something like the rooftop Koreans defending their stores could happen today without those people going to jail?
I think it would definitely be more problematic. Remember, it's not so much getting convicted. It's the whole process of being arrested and having to defend yourself and having that hanging over your head. The process is the punishment. So I can absolutely see them targeting law-abiding citizens. California has essentially declared gun owners persona non grata. It doesn't make any sense, of course. Taking guns away from law-abiding people does not lessen crime, and everybody knows that. What lessens crime is putting criminals in jail, which is the exact opposite of what they want to do. So it's not so much a policy goal, rather than them acting out their prejudices against people they see as the other. And gun owners in California are the other.
In the 3 decades since the LA riots, the rooftop Koreans have become an iconic meme in celebration of self-defense, and perhaps more poignantly, a time when guns were still proudly seen as part and parcel of the American identity, no matter your ethnicity.
Each gun makes lots of battle sounds. Just press the trigger and listen.
Guns symbolized freedom, life, and liberty.
Is it real? Looks like real. Hey, it sounds like real.
They were an indispensable part of the mythos of America, immortalized not only in its founding documents, but also in American movies since the dawn of film.
Well, you son of a...
From the Revolutionary War to the taming of the old frontier, guns placed hard power in the hands of the people.
It's got to be regulated, and I think even the hunters and the people who use guns legitimately will have no problem with that.
But in modern times, this message has disappeared from the institutions and popular media.
It shouldn't be easier to fire your gun than it is to unlock your iPhone.
How many more colleges? How many more classrooms?
How many more movie theaters?
We want limits on who can walk around with an AR-15.
Enough. Enough.
Enough.
As an American.
As an American. As an American.
The thirst for content saluting this American tradition has not disappeared from the public, though. And to fill this void, citizen content creators have taken up the torch. Meet Gun YouTube.
Point your guns in that direction at all times. Always keep your finger off the trigger until you're lined up on the target. Don't touch guns unless you ask us first. If you have any questions, there's no stupid questions on a gun range. We don't mind teaching you guys whatever. Like if you don't know how to handle something, you know, we'll figure it out. And honestly, from there on, like, we should be pretty good.
These two internet luminaries are Cody, aka Donut Operator, and Brandon Herrera, known as AK Jesus, whose YouTube channels boast a combined reach of over 6 million viewers.
What is up, you sexy YouTube mother lovers, as you...
They were kind enough to invite me over for a range day at their ranch near San Antonio, Texas.
We got a lot of guns.
It's funny, it's like people are like, these Texans want to shoot giant guns, and we all have giant guns. We got our 50s and our 338 Lapuas and our 300 Win Max and all that stuff, but the most fun thing to shoot is just like these little baby guys that couldn't hurt anyone. Took me a second to get that one.
Am I hitting the target?
Oh no.
No, not even close.
It's not sighted in whatsoever.
Oh!
There you go.
Can you sum up gun YouTube for me? What is that?
You're the gun too, right?
Oh yeah, that's fair.
Well, so gun YouTube has always been kind of like, oh well, I've got a gun, let me do something cool with it, whatever. And it turned into like gun reviews and people like reviewing products and things. But then you had like entertainers that broke out early in the day, like FPS Russia, that really kind of changed it to where like normal people could enjoy gun content. And I think that is where that space started to evolve into what it is today.
How do you feel about how gun owners are portrayed in America by the media?
It's not good. No, it's not great. No, it's I don't know. I feel like a lot of people look at it like these dumb rednecks just running around shooting guns in the air.
I think it has a lot to do with who's making the content, like who's making the piece, because it's a bunch of people who have never been around that gun culture. Like it's a bunch of, LA types, New York types, whatever, people who, took theater in college. So like they're not familiar with gun culture. So the only thing they have to build their perception of that is just off of caricatures that they've seen.
Well, you know what worries me about this is it seems like a lot of people get their opinion, even politicians, their view of guns from Hollywood.
That's what the politicians see, though, is Hollywood.
Your Second Amendment rights should not give you the right to buy weapons of war.
I read the legislation and it said that it would regulate barrel shrouds. What's a barrel shroud and why should we regulate that?
I'm not saying it was the best bill, but that was the best bill
Do you
they
know
could
what a
get
barrel
out at that
shroud
particular
is?
time. I actually don't know what a barrel
Oh,
shroud.
okay,
I can
'cause it's
believe
in your
it's a shoulder thing
legislation.
that goes up.
Does it worry you that politicians are making policies off of such a vague understanding of what guns actually are?
That wears the shit out of me. Like, dude, you have no idea what you're talking about.
Guess what? A shotgun will keep you a lot safer. A double-barrel shotgun than the assault weapons in somebody's hands who doesn't know how to use it, even one who does know how to use it.
I've held an AR-15 in my hand. I wish I had it. It is as heavy as 10 boxes that you might be moving.
The .30 caliber clip.
It's harder to use an assault weapon to hit something than it is a shotgun, okay?
To disperse with 30 bullets within half a second.
But that would ban most pistols. That would ban most...
No, but pistols are different. You have to pull the trigger each time. An assault weapon, you basically hold it, goes... Blah, blah, blah.
It really makes me worry about the entire political system as a whole, because like guns are kind of like our thing, and you realize, wow, they have no fucking clue what they're talking about. That's probably true for most other things that they talk about. It's just we don't have the expertise in those fields to know just how stupid they are. There's not really a lot of prerequisites to being elected. You don't really have to be an expert at anything you're legislating.
I'm determined to ban assault weapons in this country. Determined. I did it once before, and I'll do it again.
What is an assault weapon?
So an assault weapon is a made-up term, essentially is what it is. So like I get into the semantics of this occasionally. An assault rifle is a real term, like it's a definable term. It is an intermediate cartridge, infantry rifle with the ability to go select fire or to go full auto. That is an assault rifle. An assault weapon is something that was just kind of invented somewhere, if I had to guess, somewhere around the 80s, to define weapons that basically liberal politicians don't like. It varies from, it has a high capacity magazine to a heat shield, which is just there to make sure the shooter doesn't burn their hand on the barrel. Just any of these assault features that basically they see in, gangster films or whatever that they feel like are scary that don't actually make the weapon more dangerous. That's pretty much where that came from. I think it's become abundantly clear to all the people in the middle, especially the middle right, who are saying like, oh, well, do you really need machine guns? Do you really, we can do red flag laws. We can do background checks, universal background checks. People that were willing to cave. After this most recent bout of gun restrictions, the fact that they immediately turned around and went to assault weapons ban that is now like on the floor of the Senate, or the House rather, the fact that they immediately did, they just kept pushing, should be a sign to everybody. Like you cannot give them an inch because they're out for the end game.
And what is the end game exactly? If so-called assault weapons can be anything you want, what's to stop politicians from trying to ban all guns under that definition? even handguns.
2 weeks ago, you saw a man standing there pointing a semi-automatic pistol at him. He thought he was going to die, and in that instant he found the courage to act and wrestled a semi-automatic pistol away from the gunman who had already killed 11 people in another dance studio. 11. He saved lives. It's time we do the same. Ban assault weapons now. Ban them now. Once and for all.
But is this push to ban almost any gun supported by the public, even liberals? When I traveled to Los Angeles, one of America's most liberal cities, I thought I'd ask around. So we're just asking regular citizens, what are your opinions on guns in America?
Oh, we're from the South, we love them.
I am a firm believer that an armed society is a polite society.
A responsible person should own a gun, but if you're irresponsible or something of that nature, then I don't think you should. I don't think it matters the laws. I think that people just find a way to get a gun if they want a gun.
What is an assault weapon?
A meat cleaver, a rolling pin.
Anything. This could be an assault weapon if I wanted to. He could be an assault weapon.
Wait a minute. This is Hollywood. How is it possible that out of the few who wanted to talk to us, we couldn't find a single person who wanted to ban guns? Well, except for this guy.
I don't know how it works, especially here because I'm from France. But yeah, as I told also before, they should be more restrictive about this.
Yeah, no surprise there. Since Hollywood is filled with visitors looking to get a glimpse of that Tinseltown magic, I figured we'd head north and pay a visit to Woke Lib Central, Berkeley, California. Do you guys think that guns should be banned in America?
No.
No.
Depends.
No, I don't think there should be banned.
I feel like it kind of just depends on what you're doing as a person with that gun, you know?
I think there just needs to be like stricter gun laws.
I do think people have the right to bear arms.
Would you say you both support the idea behind the Second Amendment?
Yeah, definitely.
There's still going to be violence no matter what. It's just going to be a different weapon.
If the police and the government carries automatic weapons, I think the public should be able to as well. I don't think they should, but if they have them, we should be able to.
Are we being psyoped here? This whole anti-gun thing? I genuinely am at a loss. I'm at a loss. We're having trouble finding people in America that actually, have gripes with the Second Amendment. Do you think we'll be able to find people here in Berkeley?
Definitely, yeah. Just there's more people up there. If you go to the campus, you'll find a decent amount of people there.
It's literally just waves of people in masks and AirPods. No one wants to talk. It's terrifying. We're asking people here in Berkeley whether or not you support the Second Amendment.
Interesting.
The right to bear arms? Absolutely not.
No. Do you support or are you against the Second Amendment?
I'm not sure that's a helpful way to phrase the question. I think
I personally do feel that people should have the right to bear firearms if they're well trained.
Second Amendment was written by a bunch of entitled white men like 300, 400 years ago.
Do you support the Second Amendment?
I don't know what the Second Amendment is.
Which is the Second Amendment?
The right to bear arms.
No.
I think they should ban that. No one should have guns.
I think it causes more hurt than it does, safety.
I'm strongly against.
Why are you strongly against it?
Because it...
Why should we ban guns?
Because people use it for crazy reasons and they're not getting any help.
I believe in the right to protect yourself, but not to the point where we have automatic rifles easily available.
If you want to have a rifle for hunting or something simple like that, but to make the argument that you need an AR-15 to go about your Second Amendment rights is horseshit. I don't own guns. I never will own a gun. I'm not even curious about them.
So I have never shot a gun.
You don't and shouldn't have the right to endanger people like that in the way that they do.
What about people who would say that they need a gun to protect themselves from people who want to endanger them? Do you support the Second Amendment?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm a gay Republican. So, yeah, I know. Oh my God, yeah.
Do you feel unsafe on this campus?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, I'm an older transfer student too, so that adds to it. But as far as like my opinions, yeah.
So even here in Berkeley, California, I'd say opinions on the Second Amendment, pretty split. And as for the few people we did find that absolutely hated guns, wanted them banned, they admittedly didn't know much about them in the first place. I actually think that this is a less controversial issue than the media are portraying it to be. I think there's a small elite group that work in journalism, that work in politics, that work in lobbying and activism, that have this extremely niche opinion about guns in America, that are somehow at the forefront of this conversation, while 90% of Americans do not agree with them. And that has been our experience on the ground. I really don't understand where this group of activists, journalists, and politicians are coming from or what their angle is, because they're far from representing their constituents. You cannot have a conversation about guns in America without talking about the effect powerful lobbies have on that conversation, including the National Rifle Association, the most powerful and well-funded pro-gun group in America.
That brings us to perhaps the most ingenious and insidious NRA tactic.
Despite being a favorite punching bag for anti-gun politicians, the NRA did not start as a gun rights group. Founded in 1871, its aim was to promote marksmanship and gun competency. In fact, it might surprise you to learn the NRA itself supported early gun control legislation. The NRA backed the first federal gun control law, the National Firearms Act of 1934. They also backed the Federal Firearms Act of 1938 and initial versions of the Sweeping Gun Control Act of 1968.
The hour has come for the Congress to enact a strong and effective gun control law.
Even more surprisingly, the NRA supported California Governor Ronald Reagan when he signed into law the Mulford Act, which prohibited the public carry of loaded firearms without a permit.
There is absolutely no reason why out on the street today a civilian should be carrying a loaded weapon.
The legislation came in response to the Black Panther Party conducting armed patrols in public, a constitutionally protected activity with the goal of deterring police brutality against members of the Black community. Recognizing the bill as an attempt to disarm Black Americans, the Black Panthers led a demonstration at California's state capitol in Sacramento, fully armed.
The Second Amendment of the Constitution guarantees the citizen a right to bear arms on public property.
Is there any law against carrying a loaded weapon in the assembly chamber, for instance?
No, that is one of the purposes of the Mulford bill, to make a misdemeanor to carry a loaded weapon.
2 months later, the bill became law. It is a twist of irony that conservative Governor Ronald Reagan, with the NRA's support, launched the modern gun control movement, while the left-wing Black Panthers did the same for the modern gun rights movement. Yet today's NRA would probably have been on the Black Panthers' side. This apparent change of heart largely coincides with the rise of an increasingly well-organized gun control lobby and legislative infringements on the right to keep and bear arms, such as the 10-year assault weapons ban in 1994.
Recorded vote, the yeas are 216, the nays are 214, and the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion.
In more recent years, groups like the Brady Campaign, the Giffords Group, and Everytown have grown in prominence on the back of increasingly frequent and publicized mass shootings. And while these groups pale in comparison to the juggernaut that is the NRA, There's an even bigger kid on the block lobbying for gun control: the mainstream media. Pew Research reports that after the Sandy Hook shooting in 2012, newspaper journalists used the term gun control more frequently than the terms NRA, Second Amendment, and gun rights combined. Similar findings were collected from television broadcasts as well. This shift was reflected on Twitter, with 64% of tweets supporting gun control in the 3 days following the attack. When the initial outpouring of support eroded in the week after, only 30% of the Twitter conversation called for more gun control versus 35% opposing further restrictions. In fact, the research shows that support for gun control on social media is almost entirely driven by the mainstream news cycles. The dark implication, of course, is that the news cycle following a mass shooting greatly benefits the gun control lobby, even though these shootings make up less than 1% of gun homicides in the US year after year. But once the headlines fade, the view of Americans, even in liberal strongholds like Berkeley, are not reflected in the anti-gun rhetoric on display in the media. Which brings us back to gun YouTube. Could they have been the ramparts withstanding this all-out media assault of the past decade?
Do you think that gun YouTube has changed gun culture?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
In what ways?
I think gun YouTube is starting to lead gun culture in a way, because that's the entertainment that these people are finding on the internet. That is what they're consuming in the gun world, so to speak.
And it's also, especially in a positive manner, it's a lot of people, especially Canadians. There's not a lot of firearms that we have down here in the U.S., and we're showing it in a ha-ha funny way, but at the same time, we're being super careful about it, as you guys saw it here today. And we're leading people to get interested in firearms and be safe about it. It's really cool.
What would you say to those who believe firearms should never be viewed as entertainment?
I have no idea why they would believe that. I actually can't fathom why they would say that.
Probably, so if I were to put myself in the body of a leftist or a progressive right now, they'd probably say these
probably weigh about 50 pounds more, but continue.
These are weapons of death and destruction, and they ruin people's lives.
Sure, they absolutely could. So can your, Honda Civic. It's just another tool. It's just anything. It's an inanimate object. So it all depends on we can go out here and have a lot of fun. Or we could go do something heinous with it, but that's not what we're doing.
What are we doing right now?
We're about to blow some shit up.
Grab this. This is where you have plenty of room that you're able to mix this up.
That was so lame. Who mixed this fucking Panerai? So lame.
Cody got both of his. What happened?
Mine fizzled.
What is this?
So that is an MG3, which is, the Hitler's buzzsaw during World War II, but in a NATO round.
And why does your everyday American need access to Hitler's buzzsaw?
I don't necessarily think they need it, but it's really cool, and I don't know, it's a piece of history. I dig it.
You should it?
I don't know, do you need to?
No, but I want to.
All right.
Yeah, that literally shook my whole body. I felt like I kind of went for a crazy kind of massage.
Oh, it's a very expensive massage.
Charlie in the wire! Charlie in the wire!
The Second Amendment, the reason why it's foundational to the United States is not because Americans are bloodthirsty monsters that want to slake, their thirst on the citizens of America. It's because they believe fundamentally that there is a balance of power between the state and the population it's meant to serve. And that balance of power is maintained by force. So you cannot have all of the force concentrated in central government
You have to have a civilian population that is capable of countering that. And I think we have that here, and I think we would be fools if we gave it away.
Guns are part of the mix of America. If America is the greatest country on earth, if our democracy is so worth defending, which it is, and I've actually defended it, why do you think you can take a component out of it, like personally owned weapons, and it's not going to change that?
What happens to a disarmed nation?
A disarmed nation becomes a nation of serfs. Normal people become terrified of criminals. They become terrified of their own government.
We have a lot of people within politics, and they are promising people that if they can just infringe on some of your essential civil liberties just a little bit more, they'll keep you safe. You can bet on that if you would like. History shows that it does not have a good track record.
The track record of governments killing defenseless people reached a bloody peak in the 20th century, with the total number of these deaths far exceeding those from all wars combined, including both world wars. In fact, a new term had to be invented to accurately describe this grim statistic: democide, or death by government. Coined by Professor R.J. Rummel of the University of Hawaii, democide is defined as the intentional killing of an unarmed or disarmed person by government agents acting in their authoritative capacity and pursuant to government policy or high command. The 20th century is littered with democide, from the killing fields in Pol Pot's Cambodia to the Armenian genocide during World War I. But three governments in particular took the concept of democide to unfathomable levels. January 1918. 2 months after taking control of the Russian government, the Bolsheviks published the Declaration of Rights of the Working and Exploited People, in which they call for the arming of the working people and the complete disarming of their political enemies, the so-called propertied class. Less than a year later, in December 1918, the Council of People's Commissars decreed the surrender of all weapons by all people except card-carrying party members. The sudden, sweeping disarmament of the Russian people preceded a bloody legacy of mass murder that came to define the Soviet Union, from the Red Terror to the genocidal famines in Ukraine and Kazakhstan to Stalin's Great Purge. The total estimated death toll, over 60 million. It's a common misconception that Hitler confiscated all the guns after taking power, but the story of gun restrictions in Germany begins before the rise of the Third Reich. After losing the First World War, Germany was forced to abide by the Treaty of Versailles, in which the victorious Allies required Germany to disarm its citizens. Gun prohibition laws were passed in 1919 and 1920, the latter aptly titled The Law on the Disarmament of the People. 8 years later, regulations were slightly relaxed to allow for civilian gun ownership, but only if they could demonstrate competence and a need for self-defense. Few qualified, and those who did were placed on a gun registry.
Germany, under President Hindenburg, was a republic. And yet in this republic, an aggressive despotism took root and flourished under Adolf Hitler.
When the Nazis took power in 1933, they combed through these gun registration lists to find and disarm their enemies, primarily the Jews. 2 years later, Hitler explicitly banned Jews and other groups from acquiring gun permits. He also relaxed gun restrictions for Nazi Party members, allowing them to carry weapons without a permit. We all know what happened next. Including the Holocaust, the overall democide figure for Nazi Germany is an estimated 20 million dead. Similar to Germany, gun control was not introduced by the eventual mass murderers, in this case the Chinese Communist Party. To the contrary, the CCP leveraged armed peasants in their civil war against the nationalist government, who were the ones to establish gun control in 1935. Only upon taking power in 1949 did the CCP's view on gun ownership begin to change. In several campaigns throughout the 1950s, Mao's communists slowly confiscated millions of guns, moving from one region to the next, indoctrinating the masses to give up their weapons for the revolutionary cause. By 1966, coinciding with the start of the Cultural Revolution, one of the deadliest periods in Chinese history, Chairman Mao enacted a blanket prohibition on civilian gun ownership. The estimated democide toll in communist China ranges from 70 to 100 million in the 20th century alone, and the CCP is still in power today, continuing their iron grip on their subjects with some of the most severe gun restriction laws found anywhere in the world.
The people who want disarmament do not want disarmament. They want everyone else disarmed. Their underlying premise is that they will always either have the guns themselves or, more likely, control over the force that has the guns.
That's why back in 1994, I took on the NRA and passed the assault weapons ban. For 10 years, mass shootings were down. 10 years in a row. It's time to ban these weapons.
These are actually effective weapons, that they're semi-automatic, intermediate caliber, effective rifles that, unfortunately, are good at killing people. And Joe Biden this past week said,
and for those brave right-wing Americans who say it's all about keeping America's independent and safe, if you want to fight against the country, you need an F-15. You need something a little more than a gun.
that's not true. It's not true at all. As an American veteran, we lost Iraq. We lost Afghanistan. And the people we were fighting were dudes in flip-flops with 2 magazines stuffed inside their underwear and an assault rifle. And all they did was they ambushed American security personnel until American security personnel decided that it was not worth it anymore and they buzzed off. So, Joe Biden's full of shit.
Chairman Mao said power grows out of the barrel of a gun. At the end of the day, it does. And the guy with a gun is going to do the dictating. Well, I propose the people do the dictating. I propose the people have the say, and that requires an armed citizen.
If the government succeeds in pushing gun control to extreme lengths in America, will Americans comply?
No. You will see, some will, but you'll see a lot of resistance, and I expect that there would be violence.
I think that there's 40 million to 100 million Americans who wouldn't let that happen. So unless the people who want European style or Canadian style or Commonwealth style gun control, unless those people are willing to go to war with 40 to 100 million Americans, that will kill way more people than our average annual violence. Unless they're willing to take that step, I don't think European style gun control is coming to the United States.
You genuinely believe there would be a civil war if gun control was taken?
I think 40 million to 100 million Americans would not turn in their firearms. And I think if law enforcement started kicking in doors to take guns, law enforcement would start getting hurt badly.
If it does go down that route, what will that look like?
It's not going to look good for anybody. That's why I think it's important to try to, do as much as you can before it gets to that point, because nobody's going to like what happens.
Stop it before it gets there.
Yeah. Because as many people want to be edgy on the internet, nobody's going to enjoy that. That's not going to be fun. No matter what that ends up looking like, it's not going to be fun.
I would prefer we use the means that we still have ahead of us. We can use the courts. We can use the justice system. We can use persuasion of people in at least some areas of the media where we're still allowed to speak. People have a lot of criticism of how elections are run. I know I was in Las Vegas helping in the election fight. Found fraud, yeah. But those still remain the primary options.
The court has said that people are entitled to those guns in common use for self-defense and other lawful purposes, and nothing is in more common use than the AR-15.
So you don't think the talk of banning assault weapons that's continuing today will survive judicial scrutiny?
No, it won't.
So fight for your right to keep and bear arms, accept no compromise, and, understand that nobody wants you to be unable to protect yourself for your own good. It's always for their own good.
As I journeyed through the United States making this film, I half-jokingly asked everyone I met what they thought an assault weapon is.
What is an assault weapon?
And I got a variety of responses.
An assault weapon is many things.
That's the question. I mean, I think it's a made-up term.
It's a fiction.
If I'm assaulting somebody with an object, that becomes an assault weapon.
It could be anything from like a stick to a slugger to a gun.
Yeah, no one knows. No one knows, but we're talking about banning them.
Scary, right?
But we don't talk about assault fists. We don't talk about assault knives. We don't talk about assault vehicles. We don't talk about assault weapons because it creates in the image of the person that hears it something scary, something that is reasonable for them to oppose.
All of these answers are correct, but ultimately, an assault weapon is a tool for the defense of liberty. Whether it's a stick, a knife, a crossbow, or an AR-15, an assault weapon gives you, the individual, the power to defend yourself, your family, and your property against criminals. Whether they roam the streets of Baltimore, enter a defenseless high school to murder kids, or wear a government uniform at the behest of dictators looking to commit democide. It just so happens that a semi-automatic rifle like the AR-15 is one of the most effective tools for this task. And this is precisely why the government wants you to fear these rifles, because they fear them. In his work researching democide, the late Professor R.J. Rummel found that the less democratic a regime, the more severe its internal political violence. As I settle back into my home in Canada, I'm struck by how far we as Canadians have fallen from the ideals of democracy in the last few years alone. During COVID, we saw a shocking degree of political discrimination against the unvaccinated. Citizens were fined, fired from their jobs, barred from public transport, barred from even leaving the country.
Only those who are fully vaccinated can travel anywhere in Canada.
When they protested, they were arrested, brutalized by police, trampled by horses, and some even had their bank accounts frozen. Who would have thought this could ever happen in Canada? And America is not immune to this disintegration of democracy either, with the political imprisonment of protesters and the sham prosecution of a former president. The main difference is America still has the Second Amendment. In Canada, recently the government have banned swaths of rifles at a frightening pace, and even the ability to buy, transfer, or sell handguns.
As of this month in Canada, I can no longer buy another Glock ever again. Can't transfer it, nothing. That's something I'm not looking forward to telling my child that no, sorry, you will never be able to own a handgun, and maybe even not a gun anymore in the future if this trend continues. It's looking like in the future we are going to live in a country here in Canada where the only one who has the right to hard power to gun ownership is going to be the state.
And while Americans have a constitutional right to keep and bear arms, can you really trust the Joe Bidens of America to not find a way to infringe on that right? They've banned assault weapons before. Automatic weapons are already prohibited. Bump stocks are illegal. Suppressors are highly regulated. Entire cities are practically gun-free zones. The Second Amendment, as it stands today, is already infringed. How much further do you think the government want to take it?
What in God's name do you need an assault weapon for except to kill someone? Deer aren't running through the forest with Kevlar vests on, for God's sake.
Joe Biden is right. You don't need an assault weapon to hunt deer. You need one to resist tyranny. If you're an American, do you really want to be without an assault weapon as America becomes less and less democratic?
I think we're living in a cycle where our rights are slowly eroded by government before we realize that they've gone too far. And I fear that we all may live to see the end of that cycle. And it's not one that's going to be pretty, and it's not one you're going to want to be disarmed in.
Take it from me, buy an assault weapon today. Learn how to use it today, before it's too late.